I survived the fire. My family started to collect insurance money. Now my brother, ex-husband, and step-parents are furious I'm testifying against them. Hello my people. Don't forget to hit subscribe, say hi below and share your location. We love seeing our family from all over the world. Let's get into the story. The smoke woke me at 2:47 a.m. I remember checking the time. That specific detail burned itself into my memory like everything else that night. My name is Simone, and I was 34 years old, sleeping in my childhood bedroom at my family's house because my life had completely fallen apart. My ex-husband Adrian had drained our savings. My job had terminated me. My mother had called with that voice that made you feel like you owed her your survival, so I'd come back to this place I'd sworn I'd never return to. The smell hit me first. Acrid chemical wrong. Not the natural smell of wood burning. Something intentional. I stumbled out of bed, disoriented, my lungs already burning. The hallway was thick with gray smoke. My bare feet hit the hot floor and panic exploded through my chest. This wasn't an accident. I'd worked in property management for 8 years before the termination. I knew how fires moved, how they breathed. This was strategic. I ran toward my brother Devin's room. He'd never left home, never had to survive like I did. The heat intensified as I moved. The staircase was already becoming a death trap. My lungs screamed. My eyes couldn't stop watering. I heard my stepfather Raymond shouting downstairs, not in panic, but in what sounded almost like coordination. Did you get the garage? My mother's voice. Don't ask questions. Just move. That's when I understood. That's when the betrayal started its slow burn through my veins, hotter than any flame. I knew their financial troubles. I'd overheard conversations. But this? I'd lived through enough betrayal with Adrian to recognize the pattern of people choosing money over love. Over life. Over me. My survival instinct kicked in. I couldn't save anyone who didn't want to be saved. I made it out through the kitchen window, my nightgown torn, my skin singed. The cool night air felt like a violent slap. Behind me, the house was becoming an inferno. Our family home, the one my mother bragged about to her church friends, burning like a funeral pyre. I collapsed on the lawn, choking, watching. That's when I saw them. Devin, my brother, stumbled out the front door, completely unharmed. Completely calm. Raymond and my mother, Patricia, emerged seconds later, moving with purposeful urgency. Patricia glanced at the burning structure, and I saw something in her face I'd never forget. Satisfaction. Cold, calculating satisfaction. Simone. Devin spotted me, rushing over with practiced concern. Oh my God, are you okay? His voice had the right tremor, but his hands were steady as they helped me up. Too steady. What was that down there? I asked, my voice hoarse from smoke inhalation. I heard you. I heard Raymond asking about the garage. Devin's face froze for exactly 2 seconds. That's all it took. 2 seconds where the mask slipped and I saw my baby brother, 10 years younger than me, the one I'd protected from our father's violence for years, as a stranger. A conspirator. You're confused, he said slowly. You inhaled a lot of smoke. You're not thinking clearly. Patricia appeared then, pulling me into an embrace that felt like a trap. Baby, we need to focus on getting you medical attention. Devin, call 911. Don't mention anything except the fire. The paramedics arrived within minutes. Too coincidental, actually. Like maybe someone had already called. Like maybe this had been choreographed. I watched from the ambulance as firefighters battled the blaze, as my family stood wrapped in blankets, as Devin's girlfriend Clara appeared. She'd been asleep upstairs apparently, looking genuinely terrified. At least I thought it was genuine. I'd stopped trusting my own judgment by then. In the hospital they treated my second-degree burns while I said nothing. The police came with their questions and Patricia sat beside me, her hand gripping mine hard enough to hurt. Tell them it was electrical, she whispered. You don't know anything. Tell them you were sleeping. I looked at her. This woman who'd raised me, who'd wiped my tears when I was 5 and my father had thrown plates, who taught me survival was more important than honesty, and I realized, she would have let me burn in that house if I'd been any less important to her usefulness. 3 days later, I was released from the hospital with prescriptions for pain medication and recommendations for therapy. The insurance company moved faster than anyone would expect. A representative named Mr. Saunders sat in my mother's living room. Yes, they'd escaped to a luxury hotel and now were staying with her sister, explaining the claim details. $840,000, he said matter of fact. That's the replacement value plus contents. The investigation suggests faulty wiring, probably in the garage. Lucky you all got out. Could have been tragedy. My stepfather Raymond smiled. I watched his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed. That tiny gesture told me everything. He was nervous. He was guilty. And he was trying to hide it. When will the funds be released? Patricia asked, her tone deliberately casual, but I heard the hunger beneath it. Investigations take time, Mr. Saunders explained. We have to be thorough. We'll be conducting interviews with all of you separately. Witness statements. We'll examine electrical systems, structural damage, any point of origin indicators. Standard procedure, nothing to worry about if everything's legitimate. After he left, I retreated to my temporary room at my aunt's house. My phone had miraculously survived. That's when I discovered the security footage. Devon had texted the family group chat, so none of us can access the security system login anymore. Weird glitch. But I had the backup footage sent to my personal email. I'd set it up years ago when I'd worked in property management, a habit I'd applied to my own family home. I'd never trusted them entirely, not after growing up with my father's violence, his screaming, his unpredictability. That paranoia, it turned out, had saved me. The footage was clear. Crystal clear. At 2:15 a.m., Raymond entered the garage with a red container. Gasoline. At 2:22 a.m., Devon appeared with him, handing him rags. At 2:31 a.m., the screen went white, flash of light, intentional destruction of a camera. But the damage was already recorded. At 2:42 a.m., they both emerged, checked the kitchen, and then continued their choreographed evacuation. I watched my brother, the one I'd sacrificed for, the one I'd gone without meals to feed as a child, deliberately set that fire. I watched my stepfather orchestrate the distribution of accelerant. I watched my family commit a felony, one that could have killed me. I sat alone in that room, my burns throbbing, my heart exploding, and I made a decision that terrified and empowered me simultaneously. I wasn't going to be a victim of their greed. I was going to be their reckoning. Before I could act on the footage, my ex-husband Adrian appeared at my aunt's house like a bad infection resurfacing. He'd heard about the fire, apparently through his new girlfriend who worked as a nurse at the hospital where I'd been treated. Nothing about Adrian was ever coincidental. "Baby, I heard what happened," he said, standing in my aunt's living room with flowers I didn't want. He was wearing the cologne I used to love, a manipulation tactic so obvious it almost made me laugh. Almost. "I've been worried sick about you. You've been busy," I said quietly, sitting on the opposite end of the couch. "I hear congratulations are in order. Engagement, correct?" His face flushed. "Simone, you know it's not like that. You and I, we have a history. That matters. What we had was a lie," I finished. "You took $60,000 from our joint savings. You told me it was for your mother's medical bills. I later discovered your mother had nothing medically wrong with her. You invested it in cryptocurrency and lost it all, then blamed the market instead of your own stupidity. Adrian had been my first real escape plan. I'd married him thinking leaving my family meant freedom. Instead, I'd married their echo. The manipulation, the gaslighting, the lies dressed up as love. They were all familiar rhythms I'd learned from my father, perpetuated by my mother's acceptance of his behavior. "I can help you," Adrian continued, his voice taking that syrupy tone that used to melt me. "During this difficult time. You shouldn't be alone." That's when something shifted in me. Something crystallized. I wasn't alone and I wasn't weak. I was done being rescued. I was done being available for men who treated my survival as something they could exploit. "I need you to leave," I said evenly. "Simone. I survived a fire my own family set. I survived your financial betrayal. I survived every man and woman who looked at me and saw someone convenient to use. I stood up, my burns aching, my voice steady. The only thing I'm not surviving anymore is pretending I need you. Please leave. He left and I watched him go, feeling something break inside me. Not in pain but in release. That's when I realized the footage wasn't just evidence of a crime. It was evidence of my freedom. I was finally going to be the one making decisions about my life. The next 72 hours were some of the most psychologically demanding of my life. I sat on my decision, carrying the weight of that footage like stones in my chest. I'd experienced enough betrayal in my 34 years to know that coming forward would destroy my family. But staying silent meant becoming complicit in their crime. It meant allowing them to profit from nearly killing me. I spoke with a therapist, Dr. Wilson, at the hospital's recommendation. She specialized in family trauma, and she listened while I described my childhood. My father's violence, my mother's learned helplessness that wasn't actually helplessness but a strategic acceptance of abuse. My entire family structure built on the foundation of survival through deception. What do you need? She asked, not what should I do, but what do I need? I need to stop being a pawn in their game, I answered. I need to be honest. Even if it costs me everything. She nodded slowly. That will cost you something. Families often respond to truth-telling with rejection. Are you prepared for that? I wasn't. But I was also tired of living through my own disaster because other people couldn't face their own consequences. I called a detective. My hands were shaking so badly I had to try 3 times. Detective Maria Hernandez came to my aunt's house with a partner, and I told them everything. The chemical smell of the fire. The overheard conversations. The insurance company's quick involvement. Raymond and Devin in the garage. Then I showed them the footage. Detective Hernandez's face remained professional, but I watched her partner's jaw clench. They took my statement for 90 minutes, asked the same questions different ways, trying to break my story. It didn't break because it was true. This is significant, Detective Hernandez said. We'll need you to testify if this goes to trial. You understand that means confronting your family in court. I did understand. I understood it meant Patricia would never speak to me again. It meant Devin would hate me forever. It meant Raymond would use his considerable charm, the same charm that had helped him seduce my widowed mother, to paint me as a traumatized woman looking for someone to blame. But it also meant speaking my truth into existence. It meant refusing to be a prop in their insurance fraud story. I'm ready, I said. And I felt myself becoming solid in a way I'd never been before. News travels fast through family networks. By the next morning my phone was exploding with messages. First came Devin, his tone carefully constructed between love and threat. What the hell did you tell the police? Mom's freaking out. This is not what we needed from you right now. Then Patricia, her message a masterclass in manipulation. How could you betray us like this? After everything I've done for you? After I took you back when Adrian destroyed your life? This is how you repay my kindness. With lies and betrayal. Raymond's message was different. Colder. You're making a grave mistake. This family protects its own. But you've chosen to be alone. That last one chilled me more than anything else. It was a threat disguised as a statement of fact. But I was done being frightened by veiled threats. My entire childhood had been an education in reading violence between the lines. Patricia showed up at my aunt's house in person. She drove up in her sister's car, climbed out with the determination of a woman who'd never been told no in her life, and demanded to speak with me. My Aunt Diane wanted to refuse her entry, but I went to the door. How could you? Patricia's voice cracked, but I recognized the performance. I'd watched her perform this same emotion for my father's rage, for creditors, for church congregations. Your own mother, Simone. Your own blood. You burned down your house, I said quietly, while I was sleeping inside it. You would have let me die if I wasn't useful to you afterward. I know this because I watched the footage. I watched my brother carry gasoline while you stood guard. Patricia's face went through several transformations. Bigger. Then, finally, a cold calculation that terrified me more than anything else. That footage won't hold up in court, she said flatly. Our lawyer has already reviewed it. There are too many technical questions about its authenticity. Any decent defense attorney will demolish your credibility. You're a woman whose ex-husband abandoned her, whose own employer fired her, probably for incompetence. Who do you think a jury will believe? I guess we'll find out, I replied. She stared at me for a long moment and I saw something die in her eyes. Not love. I don't think there was ever real love there. What died was her assumption that I would remain controllable. That I would always be available to absorb punishment and call it family. You're no longer my daughter, she said, and she meant it. Not as emotion but as fact. Don't contact me. Don't contact your brother. If you proceed with this testimony, you'll be destroying yourself far more than you're destroying us. She left. I watched her drive away and I felt my chest cave in. Because even knowing what I knew, even seeing her clearly, losing your mother still hurts. It hurts like losing a limb. It hurts like the fire that almost killed you, except this hurt is internal and nobody can see the burns. The trial was scheduled for 4 months later. 4 months of living in limbo, of healing burns that had become scars, of therapy sessions where I learned that trauma bonding and family loyalty aren't the same thing as love. 4 months of radio silence from my family, which hurt more than if they'd been actively hostile. I hired a lawyer, Shanice Williams, a black woman who'd made her career prosecuting financial crimes and family fraud. She was brilliant and brutal, and I needed both those qualities. They're going to try to make you look unstable, Shanice warned me during trial preparation. They'll bring up Adrian. They'll emphasize your termination from your previous job. They'll paint your entire life as a series of failures and poor judgments. They'll argue you're manufacturing this story because you need someone to blame for your circumstances. But the footage, I started. The footage will be contested, she interrupted. The defense will argue technical issues, authenticity problems, the possibility of manipulation. They have money and they'll hire expensive experts to sow enough doubt that juries might question what they're seeing. That's when I understood the true stakes. This wasn't about what was true. This was about who had the resources to convince others their truth was the only truth that mattered. The prosecution had also discovered something. During their investigation, they'd found prior insurance claims my mother and Raymond had filed. 3 previous claims in 15 years, each one conveniently timed to their financial crises. A kitchen fire. Water damage. A car accident. Never prosecuted because they'd always seemed coincidental. Never investigated thoroughly enough. This is a pattern, the prosecutor, Mr. Hammond, explained to me. This isn't desperation. This is a lifestyle. Fraud as revenue stream. When I took the stand, I wore a navy suit that Shanice had recommended. Something authoritative but not aggressive. I was sworn in by a court official who asked me if I promised to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. I did, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. The prosecutor took me through my testimony carefully. How I'd woken to the fire. What I'd heard. What I'd seen afterward. The footage. Then they presented the video evidence on the courtroom screens. The defense attorney, a white man named Charles Thornton with the kind of confidence that came from never having to wonder if the system was built in his favor, stood up for cross-examination. Miss Simone, he began, he never called me by my full name, a subtle disrespect. Isn't it true you were going through a difficult time when this fire occurred? My ex-husband had stolen our savings and I'd lost my job, yes, I acknowledged. So you were vulnerable. Desperate even. I was struggling, I corrected. I'm not sure what that has to do with what I witnessed in that footage. What it has to do with, he said smoothly, is the reliability of your recollection. You're a woman under extreme stress, dealing with multiple failures. Personal, professional, romantic. How do we know your mind isn't simply constructing a narrative of victimhood? How do we know you didn't fall and strike your head during the fire, sustaining a traumatic brain injury that's now affecting your perception? I felt anger then. Real righteous anger. The kind that doesn't explode but crystallizes. I looked directly at him. I don't have a brain injury. I have a security system that recorded my family committing a federal crime. What I am is a woman willing to tell the truth even though it costs me my family. That's not a narrative of victimhood. That's a choice for integrity. You could feel the courtroom shift. That's the thing nobody tells you about speaking truth that matters. There's a frequency to it that people can feel, even if they're not consciously aware they're feeling it. Devon took the stand on the second day of trial. He was dressed in a suit that probably cost more than I'd spent on clothes in the last year, his hair freshly shaped, his demeanor that of a man with nothing to hide. That's what guilt looks like when it's wrapped in confidence. The prosecutor asked him directly, "Did you assist Raymond Johnson in setting the fire?" "No," Devon said flatly. "I was asleep. I woke up to the smoke alarm and I evacuated like everyone else." "You categorically deny being in the garage that night?" "I categorically deny it." Then came the cross-examination from our side, and Shanice was methodical. "Where were you when your sister was being burned in that house?" she asked quietly. "I was sleeping. I didn't know." "Actually, according to security footage, you were in the garage. You can be seen on multiple timestamps carrying materials into the garage where an accelerant was being dispersed. Do you have an explanation for why the security camera would capture you if you were sleeping?" Devon's face went through that same transformation I'd seen in Patricia. The moment when someone realizes they can't talk their way out of truth. But he tried anyway. "The footage could be edited," he said. "My sister's clearly unstable. She lost her job, her marriage fell apart." "Isn't it also true," Shanice interrupted, "that you were 23 years old at the time of this fire? And that you still live in your mother's household despite being 34? The prosecutor's objection came swift, but the jury had already heard the implication. Devon was vulnerable to his mother. Devon was dependent. Devon didn't have the kind of independent adult life that might have given him the strength to refuse. That's when I felt something shift in my anger. It transformed into something more complex. I wasn't angry at Devon for being weak. I was angry that we'd both been raised in a system that had made strength look like compliance. My mother took the stand on the third day and the courtroom felt like it was holding its breath. She wore a burgundy dress that made her look both vulnerable and put together, her hair perfect, her makeup applied with the expertise of someone who understood that appearance was part of her testimony. She admitted that the family was experiencing financial difficulties. She admitted that their various businesses were struggling. But she flatly denied any involvement in fraud. "I'm a woman of faith," she testified, looking at the jury with the confidence of someone who'd spent her life convincing religious people to believe her narratives. "I would never risk my family's safety for money. That's not who I am." But then the prosecutor presented bank records. Deposits made to her account, made from Raymond's business account, made 2 days after insurance companies settled their previous claims. Multiple deposits. Multiple claims. The pattern couldn't be ignored. "These deposits could be for anything," Patricia said, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence. "They could be gifts from my husband for household expenses." The prosecutor showed correspondence between Patricia and Raymond, emails discussing deductibles, comparing settlement amounts, discussing the timing of their next financial crisis. The words were careful, never explicit, but the implication was obvious. "These emails were hacked," Patricia claimed. "This is a witch hunt." But I watched the jury. I watched them understand that my mother wasn't a woman of faith struggling with circumstance. She was a woman who'd been doing this for years. Who'd built fraud into her family structure like other people build traditions. When Shanice cross-examined her, she asked just one question. "Why didn't you try to wake your daughter when the fire started?" Patricia froze. Just for a moment, but long enough. "I thought she was waking up," Patricia said finally. "I thought she'd left." "But you didn't check," Shanice pressed. "You didn't verify that your daughter, the one you raised, was out of a burning house?" "I had to prioritize other people." "Because she wasn't part of the plan," Shanice said flatly. It wasn't a question. Patricia looked at me then across the courtroom. I saw something in her face. Regret maybe, or acknowledgement that she'd been caught not just in fraud, but in her failure to prioritize my survival. I looked away because I couldn't afford her regret. I couldn't afford anything from her. Raymond Johnson took the stand on day 4, and he was a different man than the smooth operator who'd charmed my widow mother into marriage. His hands were shaking. His confidence had been replaced by something that looked like desperation. The prosecution presented the footage again, frame by frame. Raymond in the garage. Raymond with the gasoline container. Raymond coordinating with Devon. Raymond moving with intention through a house he was deliberately destroying. "That's not me," he said, but his voice had lost conviction. "We have thermal imaging," the prosecutor said calmly. "We have analyzed the gait pattern, the distinctive tattoo visible on your left arm, the one your wife confirmed in her testimony you've had for 20 years. This is definitely you." Raymond's lawyer requested a recess, and I watched Raymond struggle to maintain composure. He was looking at serious federal charges. Wire fraud, arson, insurance fraud. The kinds of charges that meant real prison time. When cross-examination happened, Raymond's lawyer tried to paint him as a man simply following his wife's lead. As someone who'd been manipulated into participating in something he didn't fully understand. It was a strategy, but it was also the only play he had. "Did your wife instruct you to set that fire?" his attorney asked. "I was thinking about our financial situation," Raymond said carefully. "We needed money. But I didn't think it through. I went along with what was suggested." "And your stepdaughter? Were you worried about her safety?" A long pause. "Too long. I didn't think anyone would get hurt." But he had thought about it. You don't accelerate a fire without understanding that accelerant increases the danger. He was just hoping the risk would pay off financially. We waited for 2 days while the jury deliberated. 2 days of sitting in hallways with Shanice, reviewing testimony, preparing for either outcome. I stayed with my Aunt Diane, who'd been the only family member to come to any of my trial hearings. "I'm proud of you," she told me the night before the jury returned. "I know what it cost you. I know what you gave up to speak the truth." "I lost my family," I said. I was trying to state it as fact, but my voice wavered. "You exposed your family," she corrected gently. "The family you have in your future is still being written. That's not a loss, that's a beginning." The jury returned guilty verdicts on all counts. Patricia guilty on fraud and arson. Raymond guilty on fraud, arson and wire fraud. Devon guilty on arson with a lesser sentence recommendation due to his age at the time and the apparent coercion involved. As the verdicts were read, I felt something I didn't expect. Not triumph. Not vindication. Relief, yes, but mostly a profound sadness. I had won my case. I had protected myself from their lies. But I had done it by dismantling the only family structure I'd ever known. Patricia didn't look at me. She looked like a woman whose entire identity had been stripped away. Devon was crying, actual tears of someone finally understanding the consequences of his choices. Raymond's face went hard and cold, and I saw him glance at me with something that looked like hate. I'd expected that hate. I'd braced myself for it. But experiencing it anyway felt like receiving news of a death you'd already mourned. The sentencing happened 3 weeks later. Patricia received 7 years. Raymond received 10. Devon, because he was technically the passive participant, received 3 years with the possibility of parole after 18 months. They would all have probation periods afterward. Their finances would be impacted for decades. Their reputations would never recover. I watched them be led away from the courtroom, and I felt the strange hollowness that comes with getting exactly what justice demands but discovering it doesn't heal you the way you hoped it would. The media attention was intense. Woman turns in family to insurance fraud and arson. I became a headline, a symbol of ethics over family, of speaking truth to power. People I'd never met congratulated me. Victims of family fraud reached out through email, telling me I was brave, that I'd given them courage. I appreciated the sentiment, but I was also grieving. I was mourning a mother, a brother, a life structure that had been my only reference point. My burns healed into scars that I learned to live with. Physical therapy rebuilt my strength. Therapy, the emotional kind, helped me understand the difference between my family's narrative of loyalty and what loyalty actually meant. Real loyalty, I learned, sometimes looks like truth-telling instead of silence. Sometimes it means choosing integrity over comfort. I found work again, rebuilding a career in property management. The incident made me a curiosity in some circles, a pariah in others. There were employers who wouldn't touch me, who didn't want the controversial narrative attached to their company. But others, people who'd been betrayed by their own families, Wanted to work with someone who understood what it meant to be both victim and survivor. I moved into my own apartment, small but mine. No family secrets in the walls. No toxic history embedded in the foundation. I built a life that was quiet and careful and entirely my own. But here's what nobody tells you about this kind of victory. It's not actually a victory at all. It's an exchange. You trade one kind of pain for another. Instead of the pain of complicity and silence, you carry the pain of isolation and loss. Instead of being destroyed by your family's choices, you're destroyed by the distance required to survive them. 2 years after the trial, I received a letter. It came to my attorney's office, and Shanice called me personally to discuss whether I wanted to read it. It was from Devin. He was in prison serving his sentence, and he'd spent 2 years thinking about his choices. He wrote about his own guilt. He wrote about understanding too late that he'd made a decision that couldn't be unmade. He wrote that he understood why I'd testified. That he didn't expect forgiveness, but he wanted me to know that he'd forgiven himself for being young and weak and complicit. I read that letter in my apartment sitting alone, and I cried. Not the tears of relief I thought I should have been capable of, but the tears of a woman who loved her brother despite everything he'd done. Despite everything he'd cost me. I didn't write back. I couldn't. There wasn't a letter that could bridge that distance, no words that could undo his participation in trying to burn me alive. But I kept his letter. I kept it as evidence of something complicated. That people who hurt you are also people who can grow, that accountability and love aren't mutually exclusive, that sometimes surviving means letting people go even when they're trying to change. My mother never contacted me. She served her full 7 years, was released, and apparently moved out of state. I heard through my aunt that she was living quietly, that she'd stopped trying to explain herself. I think part of her acceptance that I wasn't coming back was realizing that not everyone needs to be saved by forgiveness. Some people just need to be left alone to exist with their consequences. I never married again. I did build real friendships, the kind where you don't have to hide parts of yourself. I traveled to places that weren't connected to my past. I learned that healing isn't a destination but a practice, something you do daily, something that sometimes goes backward and then forward again. The insurance company never recovered the money they'd paid out. The legal system deemed that a loss of doing business. But they did increase their fraud investigation budgets, and I was eventually contacted by investigators looking into my family's pattern of claims. I helped them understand what they needed to look for, the inconsistencies, the timing, the subtle ways that fraud isn't always obvious until someone who lived inside it tells the story. I survived the fire my family started. But I also survived myself. The version of me that thought family loyalty meant accepting abuse. That thought survival meant silence. I survived becoming the kind of woman who would testify against the people who raised her, and I learned to live with the scar tissue of that decision. If you're watching this and you're in a situation like mine, know this. Your survival matters more than their comfort. Your truth matters more than their narrative. The loneliness of speaking against your family is real, but it's not the same as the suffocation of staying silent. There is life on the other side of this choice. It won't be the life you imagined, but it will be a life. It will be entirely your own. And that, I promise you, is worth every sacrifice. The fire that almost killed me became the fire that freed me. Some rescues look like destruction. Some freedom looks like loss. But I wouldn't change it. Not anymore. If you're experiencing family betrayal, financial abuse, or insurance fraud, reach out to the National Center for Victims of Crime or contact your local law enforcement. Your voice matters. Share this story if it resonated with you, and remember, you're not alone in this fight.